David Goyer and myself drew very heavily on the history of the mythology of Batman. There is this great, 70-year history of this character.
In terms of comic book characters, Batman has always been the crown jewel of the comic book world.
Batman has been blessed in that somehow he has attracted more good writers and artists over 60-plus years than almost any other character.
The great part about Batman is that in some ways he's indestructible. As long as you stay true to the origin of who he is and what he's about, very hard character to break.
We've been perfecting Batman's story for 66 years. The movie carries that one step further.
I felt that everything we were going to do in terms of translating the character story onto film was going to have to be extremely reverent to the history of the character and the mythology of Batman. The origin story had never been addressed on film, or really even in the comics. That is to say, there isn't really a single definitive account of the journey of Bruce Wayne into Batman. So there are sort of fascinating gaps in the mythology there to be played with.
There's a gap of at least 7 years when he disappears from Gotham, and they just never told that story. And when I first talked to Chris Nolan, I said, you've got to tell that story. And I think people like origin stories to a certain extent. And it was a way of doing something new and different that had never been done in film or television or in novels or in the comic books. And that excited me, and it obviously excited DC and Warner Brothers and Chris.
The magic of the origin story is it provides the most fundamental moment of connection to the character. How would you react if this happened to you, and what set of incredible circumstances could possibly take someone on a journey from this moment in their life to this moment in their life?
He's here. Who? The Batman.
Christopher Nolan and Mr. Goyer, they really cared about the source material. They showed up here and met with Paul Levitz, and they went through tons and tons of different graphic novels and comics. They definitely culled from the last 30-some-odd years, and they got the character. They got it.
What we tried to do was provide the best resources for the filmmakers. So we went back and did everything from finding the most interesting versions of the Batman origin, the most interesting treatments of a particular villain. Here's the classic arc that introduced Ra's al Ghul. Here's the 2 or 3 best Scarecrow stories that were done. And you really let the filmmakers draw the inspiration where they may.
There were 3 pieces of work or eras of Batman that were somewhat influential to Chris and I when we were working. The Long Halloween was a piece of work that influenced us, which was this great maxi series by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. And there were elements of that. Carmine Falcone, who was one of the mob bosses in Gotham. It's a very sober, serious approach to Batman, and we really like that.
Where were the other drugs going?
I never knew. I don't know. I swear to God.
Swear to me!
And then we were also influenced by some of the 70s Batman comic books written by Denny O'Neil and primarily drawn by Neil Adams.
The late, great Julie Schwartz had a name, Ra's al Ghul, which he got somewhere, means head of the demon. And he and I decided it was time for a new major villain. Let's not recycle the Penguin yet again. And so I went home and wrote a story. Neil Adams did an incredible job of rounding out the characterization and really making it unique visually. I mean, he's clearly not the guy you pass on the street, and yet it isn't some sort of gaudy red and yellow superhero costume.
If you look back at the stuff we were doing in the mid-70s, a lot of it was the first period where Batman emerged beyond Gotham, where he acknowledged that there was sort of a real world surrounding Gotham City.
And we liked that element because we were determined not to have this film feel like it had been filmed on a lot. We wanted there to be locations that would expand it, that would make the playing field and the canvas feel larger.
Ra's al Ghul, what are you seeking? I seek the means to fight injustice.
Ra's al Ghul's goals were sort of larger than the Penguins or the Jokers or something like that.
Gotham's time has come, like Constantinople or Rome before it. The city has become a breeding ground for suffering and injustice. It is beyond saving and must be allowed to die.
He is as obsessed with his mission as Batman is with his. Batman has a kind of narrow view of things. Crime, stop it, eradicate it. Ra's has this sort of planetary view that unless we do something, we don't have much time left.
Here's a guy who actually sees Batman as an equal, as a willing heir. It's the father to the son that he never had. And for somebody to feel that way so beholdingly and then have an ultimate rejection between the two, incredibly compelling storytelling.
You are my greatest student. It should be you standing by my side, saving the world.
Here's a Batman who lost his parents, has a chance in this case to have a parent, and rejects it. There's something fascinating about that.
The jumping off point really, for me, had been a story called The Man Who Falls, and it suggests various points along the development of Bruce Wayne into Batman. This idea that he travels the world and is mentored and tutored in different disciplines by various individuals and then returns to Gotham. For me, it was a fascinating story, and it was a fascinating connection between Bruce's early childhood trauma, falling down this well, and being attacked by these bats, and then the persona that he then develops in order to use people's fear against them.
Another piece of work that influenced us was Frank Miller's Batman Year One, because that did deal with the first year of Batman being Batman, and the approach was very no-nonsense and very tough. And there was a great relationship that Frank Miller developed between Bruce Wayne and the beginnings of Batman and Gordon, who is not yet Commissioner Gordon.
I never said thank you.
And you'll never have to.
It's a great story about crime and corruption in a big city and how one man can make a difference.
As gritty a story as that is, it's a story about hope. You have James Gordon, who's given up faith in being a policeman, lost a lot of purpose in his life, and is really probably at the lowest end. And here's a guy who's a needy soul, meets probably the ultimate needy soul in Bruce Wayne's Batman.
Get her downstairs. Meet me in the alley on the narrow side.
What is that?
Back up.
What that? And together they find a way to lift each other up. So it's a great character perspective. In that book, I get to learn about Batman through James Gordon's eyes.
I think Frank was the first one to suggest that the police force in Gotham City was corrupt, and that left an opening for Batman to operate in, because if the police force were doing their job, there wouldn't be as much of a need for Batman, and that would force Gordon to rely on Batman because he couldn't rely on his own police force. That relationship we were definitely influenced by.
Frank, from Batman Year One to The Dark Knight Returns, have given such strong visual and classic interpretations of the character while staying true to everything that had come beforehand, that he really was able to embrace everything that makes the character so strong, so iconic, and so identifiable, but we're able to put that polish on it that makes it extremely contemporary at the same time. I mean, this is a 60-year-old character, and he's never felt more new than when Frank touches it.
I've read a lot of Batman stories. I would say that my all-time favorite would be Dark Knight Returns. I mean, A, it was inspirational. B, it was revolutionary. C, it really captures sort of the zeitgeist of the times. I mean, really, it came out in the 80s. It touched on politics, Reagan years, pop culture, and I thought it brought it all together in a way. So it's a great Batman story, but it's also a great story about that time in America. And it actually was Dark Knight Returns that got me into comics.
When Jim Lee stepped on board and was the artist on Hush and came up with the year-long arc on the Hush storyline, he was able to inject new life, new energy in Batman, which we hadn't seen in years. He gave everybody an interpretation that really works for today, and he gave everybody an interpretation that they can embrace and call their own for all the readers who are on the books right now.
If you draw the line between Neil Adams, Frank's work, and Jim Lee, they're all artists who cast a very full illusion. They're not drawing from a cartoon iconography as much as an immersive world. You're here, you're in the middle of this is happening to you along with the characters.
There's a heightened awareness for our characters again. With Batman and Superman soon to be following as a feature, they're back in the spotlight. People are talking about them again. And when people start talking about them, they start remembering, I remember Batman in the movies, I remember Batman in the TV show, I remember Batman in the cartoons. Batman's been introduced to almost every person, but in different medium. That's what makes it interesting. So what we had to do here is create a comic book that appealed to those sensibilities and those interests. We were kicking around this idea of a new all-star line, and naturally it seemed like a right time to do it. The fact that the movie was kicking in, the movie was about to hit the screens, the book was coming together all at the same time, it was just right serendipity for the project.
The idea behind the all-star line is to let creators work on classic characters without sort of the drag of continuity. It allows us to really go to the source material, start from scratch, and rebuild these characters up in a fresh, contemporary way, at the same time making them true to the original creations.
Frank Miller and Jim Lee are the people that can give you a definitive story. That's why we went to them. We knew, being fan-favorite artist and being fan-favorite writer, this is a match made in heaven.
Frank and I met a couple times to talk about sort of the tone of the book, what he wanted to do with the characters, sort of the approach he was going to take. And it really is a story more about Robin, which is a different approach. I mean, most Batman stories with Robin, he's always the sidekick. It's usually from Batman's point of view. And by looking through Robin's eyes, you really see Batman in a very different way. You know, he obviously his idol, but he's also, you know, an adult. So I think there's a lot of stuff that hasn't really been mined. And I think, you know, that's what Frank's great at, is really taking stuff that's been there for decades and really kind of dusting it off and putting a fresh spin on things.
The great part about working with Jim Lee and Frank Miller are that they both so intimately aware of who Batman is and have such a strong interpretation of them, and more importantly, have been instrumental in the interpretation of the character over the last 20 years, that they bring a certain level of respect and understanding to it.
So this All-Star book will actually give people kind of a fresh, modern reintroduction to the classic version of these characters. I mean, when I read the script to issue 1, I'm a 50-year-old man sitting there going, shucks, this is great.
Why have so many characters that were created around the same time faded away, yet Batman stays around? I think the pure motivation, the origin of who he is, and how he ultimately became Batman is so identifiable and so timeless that anybody's going to stay with that character because of that.
He's sort of gone from just being a comic book character to a character that's completely permeated the public consciousness.
Batman's world is recognizably ours, but it's a tweaking of reality. It's a heightening. That's, I think, exactly what this movie does and what the best Batman stuff has always done.
As you hear.
It is a story on an absolutely epic scale, and that is what Batman deserves, and that's what we tried to do. And I think that telling a story on this scale has been certainly a challenge, but also really a lot more fun than I anticipated.